All right. Yay! Thank you all for being here. I'll quickly introduce myself, then I'm going to have everybody go around and introduce themselves briefly as well. My name is Laura Hennighausen. I am the Director of Strategic Philanthropy at Purpose Possible. And through that, we're a firm that does fundraising, all sorts of great things for nonprofits and mission-based organizations. And part of the reason I'm here today, though, is because I've also been helping with a project called Arts Capital Atlanta, which is a coalition of 22 arts organizations that are bringing attention to the need for increased arts funding in the Atlanta metropolitan area. Georgia ranks last in the nation for arts funding, and so we need to do something about that. And that is why I've been asked to moderate this panel on support models. So this panel is, we're going to be focusing on different ways organizations and groups support artists and arts organizations in Atlanta. We've got a very diverse group of folks here from a lot of different types of organizations that support artists and arts organizations in very different ways. And so I'd love to get it kicked off with having each of y'all just give us a brief introduction to who you are, what your work is, and also kind of how you see artist support as part of what you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sinkay Hicks. I'm here today representing Idea Capital. This was an organization that was formed by 5 Atlanta residents. I can never remember the year. It must have been around 2009 or something like that. Maybe somebody out there knows. But we formed at a time when arts funding for individual artists was very, very much at a low ebb for Atlanta artists. And so we were looking for a model to be able to do something about that. And the real seed came from an artist who lived here at the time named Stuart Keeler, and he really conceived of Idea Capital as an art project in itself. And the idea was to test a democratic process and to test the idea of artists coming together, not waiting for big funding organizations, not waiting for big institutions, and simply let's get together, pool a bunch of money, and find an artist to give it to. And that was the genesis of Idea Capital these many years ago. And it was, as I said, 5 of us. That first year, we each put $100 into the pot, and then through a competitive process, ultimately selected the artist Allison Rentz, and she got the $500. And it has grown since then, and we've always viewed it as a community circular funding model for individual artists. So I've been with the organization, sometimes with greater and lesser amounts of intensity since then.
Hi, I'm Jessica Helfrecht, and I run Guardian Studios, which has 31 studios, and have Echo Contemporary Art, which provides exhibition opportunities for different artists. I think the way we support artists is by offering pop-ups, offering studio space, and just mentorship.
Hello, my name is Ali Bashik. I'm here representing the Goat Farm. I'm our aesthetic and creative director. And we support artists in many, many ways. We try to have like several tiers in which we are able to do so. So the first of which is that we do is arts programming. We put on, starting this year, we're going to have about 100 to 150 art events this year that we co-fund and co-produce. We also have residency programs that we offer a myriad of ways. So that's through studio space. We have more live spaces. We're able to offer that through a residency program. And then we also do experimental asset ownership. We have a program called Beacons where we've been able to help an artist named Maya Bailey who runs City of Ink. We helped him with creative financing by Peter Street Station. in Castleberry. And then we also we sold the land to Mocha GA on our property, and so they're opening up Mocha GA's brand new facility. Currently, it's under construction. And then now since we reopened, we were under construction for many years, and so we're opening up in different phases. And through this current iteration, we have now started we're collecting permanent works around the property. So that's how we do. And we also, of course, we're known for having studio spaces. So we have around 50 art studios in our West Midtown location. And then we have several satellite programs in Castleberry, Reynoldstown, Weston, and Hapeville.
Afternoon. My name is Ayana Gabriel Turner. I'm with the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta, and I run the Community Impact Team. And so what we do is we do a broad base of grant making aligned to our donors. We're an intermediate funder. We have a lot of different donors, from individual donors to family foundation donors. And how we try to support the arts first is through grants, both to nonprofits, and where we can, we do try to find spaces where we can support individual artists, and also just helping to elevate up arts for the funding community by convening funders, educating them more on the community so they understand the needs.
Hi, I'm Ife Williams. I am the Deputy Director at the Hambidge Center for Creative Arts and Sciences, which is about 2 hours from here. I have had the joy of living there for the last 4 years, and the way that we support individual artists is, first of all, by our longest running program, which is residencies. So we nurture creativity by inviting artists to come up for 2 to 6 weeks to focus in and take the time and space that they need to move on to the next phase of whatever they're working on. We encourage them to fail, to try things that they don't normally do when everyone's eyes are on them. And so we've been doing that in various iterations for 90 years. We recently finished construction on workshop space and spaces where people can come up and stay in small numbers, around 8 people in the residency side and 8 people in the workshop side, and learn very intensive creative practices. So from cooking to music to dance to visual arts. If you do something creative, we probably want you to come. And we serve about 175 artists in the residency program. The workshop program is growing, and then we have the auction that happens once a year where we sell work by roughly 200 artists participate each year. And then we do various small projects that we never know what's coming, so.
Awesome. Thank you. So as we dive into this, I know we have, as I've said, kind of a variety of ways that y'all support artists, both with funding, with space, with opportunities to be collected or to try new things. When you think about making sure that the support you are providing to these artists is really meaningful, something that is not maybe just a studio space, but something beyond that, or how you kind of plug into the ecosystem. What is that, like, where do you guys come to that from? What really inspires you in that work, and what do you make sure that you are including?
Well, I'm trying to have open calls each year to kind of meet new artists and give opportunities for artists to show their work. I think beyond the studio at Guardian Studios, they also have a yearly exhibition. So I feel like trying to figure out what that artist needs, whether it's exposure or a place to create work or have an event, I try to work with each artist's needs, where they are in their career.
I was interested in what you just said about encouraging artists to fail and allowing people to experiment. One of our initial founding principles was the idea of allowing or providing small grants, small amounts of money for artists to try experimental, new, different things. And that could be new things just for them, or it could be new things, in the world of art across all disciplines. So it's really in our DNA to provide what we call small but meaningful grants to artists who would otherwise not make that project. So some of these, these grants are anywhere from $500 to $2,000. So these aren't huge amounts of money, but what it is an opportunity for artists to say, okay, well, I have this sort of idea, which is why it's called Idea Capital, this sort of weird idea that I want to try, or this sort of different thing that's a little bit of a departure from my normal artwork, or it's something that has a very high chance of failing, of not coming to fruition, but it's something that needs to be tried. And so we look for those kinds of projects specifically that's within our wheelhouse of projects that we're looking for, what we're trying to encourage people to bring to us to fund with those small amounts.
One of the things we've done, and I want to give recognition to Karonda Baker, who is on the staff and leads our arts work. Yes. All the way amazing, is, we actually started a monthly arts calendar. Karonda's team manages it, to talk about arts events across Atlanta, and we send it to our staff. We have about 65 staff every month and encourage them to go, and the organization provides stipends. It's been this amazing thing to come back over the weekend or in the break room and hear people talk about the event they went to, hear them talk about the gallery they went to or the performance, and they may not have been in years. Sometimes people bring their friends. I brought my friends and family. And so I thought about just the idea of one of the things we try to do, again, elevate up the arts, help people understand how to support the community, and the fact that the organization will pay for the ticket and the stipend has really been something that has brought arts into our staff and have them thinking about it in a different way.
We have so many ways that we deal with artists in so many different capacities, and so we kind of try to say that we're like a mid-size, arts organization, cultural center, and so our goal is to be a place where emerging, established artists can all come together, organizations. And so for us, it can be anything from a studio visit, helping someone connect to a resource. We have a program internally called Bell Jar where we do those studio visits and we try to help people connect to just the internal Goat Farm community, but also the external Atlanta art community. And so if somebody needs a certain resource, we'll help them connect to that. And so that's how we do it on like a micro level, and then we do it through our programs where we're helping, like, for instance, we have a program with Flux that opens 2 weeks from now, and, working with them and co-producing it with them and solving for them. And so we're just able, because we've been around for so long and have so many connections, one of our biggest assets is that we're a good connector for people.
And I would say that we do lots of things that you guys touch on. We work with from emerging to established, and we encourage sort of cross-pollination between all the disciplines. So even though when you come, and it's great to look out and see all the people who I know who have come and all the people who should come, but just seeing musicians talking to visual artists, thinking how a writer approaches their creative process differently than a scientist. And so we encourage that conversation through dinner time 4 times a week. We also encourage artists to do some programming at different things, like our open house. We have artists perform to expose local people or the people who come out from down here to see the artists at practice and to encourage and support that way. We do that also at the auction. And we're really proud when we have returning artists who come back to Hambidge who have found a collaborator from their last cohort and that they're now making work or thinking about work together. So encouraging that connection and community. That's great.
Can I add one more thing? I'll also say that one of the things that we try to do, as I mentioned at the outset, we see ourselves as a funding circle, and so one of the things we do is try to constantly keep the people that we've given funding to in the circle of communication, encouraging past recipients to also donate, so that there's really not a huge difference between the folks who are receiving money and the folks who are providing money, that it's really all the same community is part of what we do as well.
Love that. So this might be a little difficult to answer, but let's go for it. So one thing that I think a lot about in our work for Arts Capital is that a lot of support models funding tends to be competitive, right? And I think probably for all of y'all, there is a bit of a competitive element to receiving support, being chosen for a grant or studio space or something like that. How do you balance the need for maybe ensuring that there is, the artistic integrity, that you're presenting great work, but also that you're supporting folks that might, be emerging or just starting or unknown and not have the right relationships or even know where to look? How do you kind of look for supporting those folks?
Well, we're for-profit, so we are, we do all of our funding internally. The way the Goat Farms business model, we're experimental. We have a lot of different streams of income, but the main one is that we rent studio space, and now we rent apartments. We take a percentage of that money, and we put it back into our arts funding. And so we are able to divvy out our money as we see fit for all of our programs that we select for the year. And so, yeah, we like to fund and produce and help people make the art. So one thing that we do in particular that I think is really special for our arts funding model is that, a dancer comes to us and they want to perform a dance program, but they're not great at, lighting and sound and marketing, and that's where we come in and we offer all of those services. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think that's great, yeah.
I would say for us, what we have tried to do over the years with varying degrees of success is try to keep our application process simple. And so we try to, it's an online application. At the beginning, this was sort of before the days of online applications, so people would have to photocopy things and send them through the mail, and But now, it's an online application. We try to keep it simple, and as we are looking through those applications and trying to figure out in a competitive sense who's going to get what, we absolutely leave a very wide space for fuck-ups, essentially. There's a lot of artists who don't know how to make a budget, and there's a lot of artists who, I would encourage you to know how to make a budget, but, but we, as we were considering the applications, we try not to hold those kinds of things against, or at least I'll speak for myself. And so we have a wide latitude for people who can't, who may not be great at documenting their work, for example, but try to recognize what the idea is that they're going for, and try to boost the signal of that throughout the process.
So we have an online application process too. We have 3 sessions or seasons, and our fall season for 2025 application just opened today. It closes on April 15th. But so that application we try to keep simple. We try not to ask you to promise us what you're going to work on like in a finite way, because it's going to take us 6 months before you get there. And we've already said you can fail. So we don't want you feeling guilty of not accomplishing what you said you wanted to do. So we try to get you to tell us a little bit, but not go too far or feel overcommitted. And then we also involve past residents and people who are established in the field to look over. We have multiple people looking at every application so that there's an average, and we try really hard to fit in as many people for a meaningful amount of time as we can.
Yeah.
So, we fund mostly nonprofits, and we try to, fund organizations that work with individual artists who are going to benefit from that. With our largest arts fund, one of the things we did over the last couple of years is make it general operating support, which means you don't have to have a specific project or program. And what we saw is, dozens more people who were able to get funding. There were smaller amounts. There are a lot of people who never got in a grant before, never got in funding before, never even applied for an application before. And so we look at that as a positive because that means people are coming to the space. It is an online application, and then hopefully getting a grant from us may mean something for somewhere else that they're applying. And also, we recognize we're not the experts except Karanda and her team who are. And so oftentimes we have to lean on artists to help us think about how to co-design. And we make sure to have a practice that if it's a focus group, you're getting a stipend. For that same arts fund, we had an expert evaluation panel. So they were able to look at it through an artistic lens, which is a little different in terms of looking at it from a subject matter expertise rather than, like, what's your balance sheet and, how much money did you bring in? And we made sure to give the people who did that evaluation stipends, and also where we can give honoraria. And so those things should be standard practice for philanthropy, but it's not always. And that gives the opportunity for individual artists to both provide the expertise which we need, form relationships, and still make sure that there's some compensation for it.
So I work for a property developer, so I don't have a lot of leeway with what I can give away. But I do have, whenever I have empty studios, I try to support artists by having pop-ups, and I've done it for individual artists, and GSU and other nonprofits too will come in and have exhibition space that I can give them for free. And then just mentorship with the really emerging artists, the ones who have their first studio there, trying to help them along and give them that exhibition opportunity. And also just helping with timelines and planning. I think a lot of new artists don't really know how to budget their time. And so when exhibiting brand new artists, like I have 3 artists opening tonight, one was done on Monday, one was done on Tuesday, and one's there painting now. So you just have to support them, meet them where they are, and hope it turns out good.
I love that. Ayanna, you mentioned that there were panels to review. And I know that some of you might not know this, but a lot of our funding opportunities, grants like Georgia Council or Fulton County have panels where they invite community members to serve on those panels to review grants. How many of you have ever done that? Good. The rest of you should. Many of them do give a small stipend, but it's really interesting to see the proposals being put forward. And those of you in the room, you guys are the experts on judging some of these organizations or the projects that are coming out. You have the great understanding of how these things work. And so my little pitch is when you see somebody calling for a panel, you should sign up. Try and do it once every couple years, maybe, if you can. I know Tina would really appreciate that back there. Awesome. So also speaking of funding, though, so Ayanna and Cinque, do you have any tips or things that you see, what advice do you have to artists to better represent themselves when they're coming to you for funding or advice or something like that? Do you see any, common mistakes or anything you want to talk about?
Okay, so I thought that I would have this laundry list of tips and tricks and whatnot, but I think we're kind of short on time. And so really I would say this. A lot of you have been on panels, so you already know this, but there are, in my experience, always more qualified, good applications than there is space for. Mm-hmm. That, in my experience, that has always been the case. So you always, at the end of the application process, end up having to make essentially arbitrary decisions about who's going to get it and who's not going to get it. So all of this is to say, if I had one piece of advice to artists, is to understand that it's a numbers game. And it's just about apply. Because some of these, the person reading your application will not have had their coffee, and some of them, they will have had their coffee. And it's going to come down to things like that. And so I guess as an overall piece of advice, I'd say if you're not doing that, that would be my advice. If you are already doing that, you are doing it right, would be my advice.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with Cinque. The demand is always bigger than the supply. And so, definitely apply. Don't be scared to apply to a grant. I will say, look at the eligibility, because you just want to make sure you're qualified, because it can take a lot of time and energy, and, you don't want to put that energy in if for some reason you're not eligible. The other thing I would say, I would say the foundation world, a lot of it runs on relationships. And so like inviting funders into a space like today, into your events, is really important, because as you continue to see and build relationships, they remember that. Another thing I would say is don't be afraid to educate funders. I was telling Laura, my background is in education. And so, I don't know a lot about the arts ecosystem, the arts sector, and the business of arts. And one of the things I've learned over the last year is the different type of medium, the visual arts versus performing arts. And I used to work for a private family foundation, and I realized that they pretty much only funded performing arts at a very high level, which is fine, but I think about what it meant to be on staff and not know that, because then on staff we can advocate and say like, hey, like, we're not supporting this whole sector of the arts. So don't be afraid to educate your funders. Don't be afraid to talk to them. Don't be afraid to have that as part of your application, to say like, hey, we're part of this sector, because you'll be surprised that so many people on the other side of that grant don't really have that expertise and knowledge. So, definitely put it in there. And I have one more tip that, the other thing I would say is come together in groups. So, I do want to give a shout out to Arts Capital Atlanta. I know that like time is short and there's so much you have to do and resources are stretched, but definitely I've seen a lot of traction happen no matter what the sector is when people come together as groups and organize. I used to do neighborhood organizing, community organizing, and just understand that a lot of times that we could not get in the room unless we were coming together. And so where you find those opportunities to come together, like I think you were saying, Cinque, your organization started out of come together, do that, because it really does make a difference. And there's power in people.
Awesome. Ife, Allie, and Jessica, you talked already a little bit about wanting to support emerging artists, younger artists. How do you make sure that you're doing that, first of all? I know mentorship is something you mentioned. But how also can emerging artists find you guys, and how do they plug into the programs that you run?
Well, now that we have the workshops, we definitely have the opportunity for people. We have opportunities for people who are well-established to teach workshops, so we also have the opportunity for assistance sometimes. We have opportunities, if you can't afford to do something, I would say always reach out and find out if you can help with it, if you can volunteer with it. We encourage people to come and volunteer for our auctions and our special events. And that connects you and gets you in conversations with people you might not normally feel comfortable walking up to, and you may end up walking to someplace with Ayanna and be able to find out that she has money that you didn't know you could apply for. So I think just having those conversations and opportunities for them to engage with people who are further along on the path, and also just because you don't have 80 years of experience as an artist. We have had, I think, our youngest artist was 20 on campus not that long ago, maybe 19. We really have a range of over 18 to in the maybe 90 was our oldest artist. And they're all there talking. And a lot of times the older, longer term artists are learning more from the younger artists. So it's very much a community once you get there. So I would say encouraging them to put themselves out there and don't minimize their experience and their value just because they're starting.
Can you say the question again?
So, in thinking about how you support artists kind of all stages in their career, how do you make sure you're supporting emerging artists, and how do they find out about your programs? Kind of how do you link it all together?
Through Art Calendar, ATL, they find out about us. So I feel like I support emerging artists, with exhibition opportunities or studio visits again, and just talking to them and encouraging them to apply for everything. And there's going to be a lot of rejection, that's the nature of the game. And I think, yeah, connecting artists with other curators or other galleries that I think they would be appropriate for is just trying to provide them with opportunities and connections that I have.
Emerging, I sort of is like synonymous to young for me. So, we were under construction for many years, so there's like this whole like demographic of Atlanta, or they don't have to be young necessarily, but from basically 2019 to 2024, we weren't doing much, so people didn't know about the goat farm like old Atlanta did. So. Tapping into those communities is something that we've been trying to do as we've reopened. So again, we're doing like 100 to 150 events a year. And so that's a mix of like collaborating with organizations and universities for us. So we're doing a lot of work with Georgia Tech. We're doing stuff with Georgia State. And so that brings in younger people who are then discovering us, and they're emerging artists. And so we're able to then, form relationships with them, and then they start pitching programs to us. So it's just this like, bringing in young blood to us. We're like vampires now, like trying to find young people. But yeah, just collaborating with different organizations. Like we have a monthly typography graphic design group. We have Atlanta Zine Club. We're working with Burnaway, with Flux, with Dashboard. And so just collaborating with people amplifies everybody's voice. So I don't know if that answers it, just that we're discovering new people by collaborating with groups and organizations that weren't around previously and need that support that we're able to offer them.
And she made me think of, when she said emerging usually makes us think young, we do find that we get people who are starting their second career or finally having the money and the confidence to stop doing what their parents made them do and become a professional artist. And so we actually have a few distinguished fellowships, which is special funding that covers your residency fee and gives you a small stipend, that are targeted by the person who is sponsoring that fellowship. But some are for an artist at a particular age that has never hit this benchmark of success. In writing, we also have partnerships with universities that will select a grad student that they then will sponsor. So we have those that are built in, and then those residents are, on campus with everyone else mixed in. But some of the partnerships and sponsorships.
I recognize that not emerging doesn't only mean young.
Oh,
I just say that.
No, but I did the same.
Yeah. So y'all are doing a lot of really great things, and there, again, is even off the stage in the audience, there are a lot of great things happening in Atlanta for artist support. But if you think about kind of what's happening and how you have to kind of do your day-to-day work, is there something that you wish would change about these models of artist support? Is there something that maybe you've seen in another city or another place that exists that doesn't exist in Atlanta? What bugs you?
I think we need more collectors. I think that people are afraid to buy art, and although they buy $50, sunglasses or $200 bags, they don't realize that they're buying art. And I think that we need to somehow encourage, teach, educate more people to buy one-of-a-kind art and to support the arts that way, or go to a performance and just get them out the door and into your places.
I'll follow up on that. I agree with that. And when you say we need to educate, to me that makes me think of journalism, that makes me think of art criticism, that makes me think of writing, which is really where my heart is. And I would love to see always more of that. I mean, here we are at Art Papers, which, the wonderful work that it has been doing and will continue to do for at least the next few years, I think is pivotal in this community. And so I'm always about more kinds of writing at every level, from the simplest to the most academic and advanced. And so I think that that is critical for doing this kind of education that you talk about, but also just entertaining, and also just allowing an environment for artists to have a public presence. And that has always been a big part of my mission as a writer and a journalist.
If I think about the philanthropy sector, I would like us to be more brave. So grants are not the only ways that we give out money or sponsorships. For example, there's a model called impact investing that we use a lot, where you're giving no-cost loans or forgivable loans, and we're using it in our housing sector, and they're going to for-profit organizations. We have people who would rather do that because they get a return on their investment. And on staff, we've talked about what would that mean to do that for individual artists. And so, oftentimes philanthropy can fund in places that other people won't before the public sector and can take the risk. And so I really wish that, folks would be more experimental in our sector and not just do what's always been done, and particularly for sectors that need different type of funding and different type of capital, because we have the ability to do it.
Right.
I would say that art in general needs to be nurtured. I think in the South, maybe people are more apologetic, and artists are less comfortable asking for things and taking up their space, and that just learning that to value ourselves, but having those people who are supporting us also value us. And it doesn't mean to coddle us, but to give those spaces and the encouragement to build the self-confidence to ask for what we're worth, not feel like we have to give away more than we're making, and to actually get the artist to be seen as a value and not as a thing that is like a decoration, right? And so I think that if the funding side and the support side could get to a point where we encourage artists to take that stance and not feel like they're going to lose out if they do, that would be great.
Oh, okay. So a follow-up to that, for folks here in the audience, how could they best support the work that you guys are doing, or support methods for the strengthening the artist ecosystem in Atlanta? Kind of how, do you have any ideas for how we could all work together and bring the folks here into the spaces that you're working?
I think it was already said, just show up. We need people in the door. And I like to cross-promote other art organizations or openings or artists that I like on Instagram. So I think supporting each other and the other art organizations, I think, will help us in the long run, and, cooperation, not competition. So I think that if we want Atlanta to be this great art center, then we have to acknowledge and love and all the other art organizations that are contributing to our ecosystem.
I would say conversation, keep talking to each other, and sharing things forward. If you can't go, share it with someone who can go, sort of your proxy. Not necessarily saying go and go and go just to be showing up, but don't feel like you have to do everything, but try and encourage other people to show up, and sometime all of you will show up at the same time. And then you can talk about it, and if you don't make it, you can hear about it. And so I think conversation and communication.
All I can say is that, my entire career is built off, my networking, the people I've met, the relationships I've built. And so that's just been so foundational for me to get to the position that I'm in, and have just the database of people and organizations and what everyone's doing. And so I've been able to connect so many dots. And so I just can't encourage anyone else. You have to do that in order to succeed, I think, is to just know what exists out there in the city. And it's a small city. Once you get involved, you pretty much know everybody. But it does surprise me still to meet new people, and there's a lot of faces here I don't know. And so that, to me, is growth for Atlanta, that I go to places, I go to art openings, and I don't recognize every single person there. But that was the case for many years. And so I'm really hopeful about Atlanta growing as an arts community, and just think everybody should put themselves out there. And when you have the social battery, of course. But just networking and meeting people and understanding what the landscape is.
And this one's a little hard. I would say where you can, join the groups and the collectives that are trying to elevate out the arts, because that's what, from my vantage point, is needed. And so, as you were saying, collaborate and support each other, because that really makes a difference.
I would build on some of what others have said and to say, consider starting your own thing. When we started Idea Capital, it was just 5 of us with no special qualifications who just decided to do it. And this is not something that anybody in here couldn't also do. I think it's important to flex those muscles, to flex those social muscles, and this is something that you can get together with 3 friends and just decide that you are just going to start this kind of organization. And so I think that that's important. I would also say there are a number of models. If you Google the sort of sub-Saharan African savings models, there are great models out there where communities come together, communities of small people, and everyone just puts a little bit of money in the pot, and then the pot of money goes to someone. These, I think, are great kinds of circular funding models that can not only help people get actual cash for things that they need, but also, again, exercise this muscle of supporting each other and actually being out and helping other people in a concrete way, and then receiving help in a concrete way.
Yeah, I love that. Those giving circles are really important. I think that Idea Capital is kind of unique in Atlanta, but those models, are very easy to kind of come up with. And
you can do them small.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be, I mean, we have a big website and a logo and everything, but you don't need a big website and a logo and all that.
Right, yeah. And if you just pull your money together just within your own little circle, like you don't have to do any of that application stuff. You just take turns with who benefits each month, right? And I think that kind of model, or using our creativity to think about ways to support financially, especially since we are in a state with so little support for the arts, and we really don't have that many private foundations that are specialized or really focused on the arts either. I think it is going to be increasingly important for us to use our creative brains to think of new and kind of broadened ways to support each other, and then also the artists in our ecosystem, right? We still have a little bit of time, but I'd love to open it up for questions from the audience. If you have questions, for any of our esteemed panel here about artist support or the work they do and how you can get involved. I think like the last panel, we have, if you raise your hand, you can either shout real loud and maybe I can repeat your question, or if you want to come up here, I can hand you the mic, but I'm tethered to the wall. So, questions? Almost a raised hand?
Yeah, okay. Outside of the formal ways of approaching your organizations, what are the best ways for artists to introduce themselves to you or pitch themselves to you, especially for emerging artists and or artists who might feel they're established but aren't confident maybe in their body of work?
Great. Could everybody hear that question? Yeah, so. Wonderful. Go for it.
On the Hambidge website, which the website is hambidge.org. Hambidge is Hambidge, no R in there at all. But all of our contact information is there. If you send me an email or someone other than you sends me an email, I will respond. You can reach out directly to me or to the office email address and ask questions and introduce yourself. We also have a sign-up place for getting our newsletters and being a volunteer, where you can tell a little bit more about what you're interested in getting involved in, and that's just a click through on the website too.
Yeah, I would say my biggest piece of advice is to not approach the person that you want to get information from during a big event, or during an opening. Like, don't pull up your phone and show your pictures during the art auction or whatever. But I think, an introduction at an event and then a follow-up with an email is a great way to introduce yourself, and I'll respond, yeah.
And I would encourage email over phone calls because emails stay there and you don't forget where you wrote down that thing that they said on the phone.
The goatfarm.info. We have you can submit a proposal. It's all kinds of proposals. It could be whatever, but that's how we get a majority of people who contact us. We have like a committee. We go through everything. But if you just want to say what's up, just come say what's up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, we're an all-volunteer organization. None of us does this. I mean, when I say us, I mean Idea Capital. We don't have any staff. So I'll be honest and say that you could write to us and you might not hear back for several days until someone realizes there's an email. So that is a potential thing that could happen. But, you know, a lot of us are out here in the community, so I would echo some of what these folks have said.
We have a newsletter on the website. It goes out about quarterly now, and we try to aggregate as many resources as we can, both ours and others. And so I always tell people that's a good first step. And so many our events and things you'll hear about in that newsletter.
And for Arts Capital, I'll say, if you work with a nonprofit, if you visit our website, artscapitalatlanta.com, we have a community of practice. And so there is a Zoom meeting every Friday at 10 a.m. That you can drop into whenever you want to. There's a loose schedule of like what they focus on each of those Fridays, and it's like leadership, marketing, development. It's listed on there, but again, you know, that's a great place. People go in there when there's a grant due to ask questions, or if somebody needs to borrow a ladder or something like that. Like there's all kinds of like great conversation in that community of practice. So that's really, again, focused on nonprofits, but I wonder, I don't know if there is something like that for artists individually, or maybe somebody out here wants to start something like that. But I think those kinds of informal opportunities to gather in like a really easy way, something that's happening regularly, I think is a good place to plug in. Other questions? Yes?
Can I extend that question a little bit, because I love that?
Yeah.
With the idea of, like, how does an artist who has a project, who knows that there's opportunities for funding, how do we socialize that project to the community of funders so that they know about it before it goes through the application portal?
Okay, so the question was, how do we socialize, if we know we have a project that we want to present, we know there's funding opportunities out there, how do we socialize that project before the actual application happens and we go through all those steps?
Like, is that important? Where does that rank?
Yeah, is it important? Is that something you guys want to see? Or do you not contact us?
I mean, I think any promotion you do on social media to start talking about your project will build interest, and, you know, getting it out early to tell people in details, I think you can, for lack of a better word, string them along until your event happens or your project. I think it's, yeah, communication, getting the word out however you can.
There was something you said earlier about how, like, when people are proposing and it's not fully perfect, you have, like, grace with it. So we're the same way. I mean, we'll look up your social media, we'll look at the website, we'll just kind of see what it looks like, and sometimes we'll say no, but come back to us in a year, try it out once, like, do a test. We want to see how that was received and how that looked, and then come back to us. It's like, we defer our yes, kind of. But we like to work with people. Like I said earlier, like, a dancer isn't good at certain things, but we can see the vision and the program, and we can connect dots for them. Like, oh, you know, this, like, we did this huge event this past September during Art Week called Sight, and you know, people came through with a small idea, and it made a lot of sense in the bigger context of the bigger idea. So we're able to, like, curate small things in that maybe wouldn't make sense as its own single program.
And I would say, at least from our point of view, you know, the more that you're kind of out there, you know, social media or however it might be, getting things out into the public realm, it's not so, at least again from our point of view, it's not so important that any one of us has seen that project previously, but the more you just have a presence at all, that does make a difference. And so whether it's, you know, a well-maintained website, for example, that makes a difference, or whether it's, again, a social media presence, because part of what we will do is we will consider not only the objects that have been submitted for a particular application, but like Ali said, looking sort of what has been this person's practice for the last umpteen years or umpteen months or whatever it might be.
I don't know how much you want to keep what you're working on quiet before you act, like how much you would want to put on your social media versus how much you want to share with someone you're trying to hopefully get money from. But some artists do send out newsletters, and they sometimes will give you a peek, and they can also curate who they're emailing to that, So if you had a funding-specific newsletter where you're talking about what you're working on, you might be able to share it there, and then get some interest if you're not ready to share it with the bigger world.
Other questions? Yes.
My question is, how do y'all, individuals or organizations, provide support to each other, either like behind the scenes or in the past or in, because I kind of know what y'all do, and I wonder how much is cross-pollinated.
Yeah, that was a great question.
I think about texting a lot of people a lot of the time. But we have coffee when we can. We are really busy usually, so we do just catch up in really small chunks. But occasionally we'll have a project that we actually are partnering with, or something that is similar enough that we'll talk through it. And so we do sometimes have organized meetings. I think it varies, but I think behind the scenes arts administrators and organizations do try to connect on many different levels whenever we're in the same space, and can stop and pause and sort of generate generative conversation over a meal or something like that.
I find that I just go to other people's events and other artists' events. Also, again, try to cross-promote on the internet. I host different schools will come, and different nonprofits have done shows or pop-ups or events. So just trying to be supportive in person and on the internet.
Ditto. Forming relationships with other arts admins and organizations, and like genuine relationships, and collaborating with them. We have, again, I'm a broken record. We do a lot of programming, and so we have a lot of partners in that, and so we form those relationships, and it's just such an honor to meet so many amazing people and make art with them. So yeah, I feel like I know a lot of arts admins, and I genuinely like them.
They're your people.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I think it's important to do it when you're not looking, right? So sometimes when you don't have anything you're looking for, there's no project on the horizon, like Allie, I am so grateful to the Go Farm right now. I mean, always, but you just said, Kate, can you come look at this space? And it wasn't like that pressing time, right? So sometimes when it's just, I think sometimes we wait till like, oh my gosh, I've got to find this out or I'm stuck. It's all those other times. And so I was like, yeah, we'd love to do something here.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh my gosh, I have a thing, right? And so I think it's those, it's sometimes when you're not looking with any intent in mind, but just starting a conversation.
I completely forgot about that. Thank you. I did, yeah. When we, reopened, I invited a lot of people, they're on my list, and to, come just check it out, and just planting the seed, and always just trying to be a place that people think of for their programs or opportunities we're just here, we want to help.
I think also often we get approached by an artist or an organization to partner or work on a project, and it's not right for us, but then we'll turn around and either talk to someone else about it or refer them to, but this might be a better. And so it's a conversation that happens without actually being a sit-down with 6 organizations, but in the end, all of these pieces have touched it, and it gets in the right spot. So, yeah, I think usually when we say no or something doesn't fit, it doesn't die there, but we will push it forward or pull it in, yeah.
Yeah, we do that as well. We always will send people elsewhere to the bakery, to, you know, or supermarket now, or anywhere else that is a better fit.
Other question? Yes.
I think I'll leave the mic.
Yes. Come on up, Shani.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for what you're doing already. I personally have been supported by a lot of you already, and I know a lot of friends and have been supported by all of you. And so I think of y'all as advocates, and I think of y'all as like, and I think y'all really get it, like what an artist needs, what an artist needs to thrive, and what they need to be pushed. And so I'm curious, in your positions, do you need to convince other people? I imagine Community Foundation, you have to. But like, how are there experiences that you've had where you've had to like push back? Like instead of just no's, but just like push back where you've had to like advocate for artists and what they're actually trying to do. And I'm trying to get a bigger understanding of this entire landscape, like outside of y'all, that like have more strings and things like that, so that we could get more experimental, risky, interesting work in our field.
You know, we're actually a real estate company with a arts organization mask on at all times. So yeah, we're always dealing with having to convince real estate developers and partners and stuff that art comes first. And it's not, our model is not an easy one. It's very tedious and painful, and you don't make as much money as you possibly could. So it's hard to convince a partner or another company to do that model. But they see that it works, that, you know, investing in the arts, clearly people are interested in it, and we're making money doing it. So that's where we are. It's just real estate companies and partners and stuff, and banks. But we have a really friendly bank that we've proven to them for almost, 16 years that we've been able to do this month-to-month model with studio spaces, and just that it works. So.
I think that being an arts organization is a lot like being an artist, and we have to convince ourselves that we should push. We have to convince each other that how we're going to push, because if you're all pushing for the same thing but not in the same way, it can take it apart. And I think that, yeah, every project has someone who doesn't think it's going to work, even a project that you do over and over again. So, yeah, I think it's constant.
I would say, I mean, we're kind of in a lucky position in that we don't have a staff, we don't have a building, we don't have, you know, any of these kinds of things. So we have actually found, you know, great receptivity in, you know, the various communities we approach and the, you know, folks that we have talked to, informally or formally. But again, I mean, we're kind of in a lucky position in that way, in that we, in a sense, don't ask for anything, you know, from folks that we encounter in the community, other than, you know, donations from individuals, you know. But I have, specifically my experience with Idea Capital is that people love the model of the organization, and the work that we support has been generally quite well looked upon.
I think for, again, Arts Capital, we have had a lot of challenging conversations with funders to, you know, things around, well, if an arts organization is struggling, we are nervous to give them more money if it might just, they're going to fold anyway. Is that a waste of our money? Or, well, why is this organization struggling year after year? They seem like maybe they don't know how to run their organization. We've had to have a lot of just very transparent conversations, very honest and thoughtful conversations to address those things. Like, well, some of our arts organizations are struggling year over year because there's just not enough funding for them, right? Or, organizations can only be eligible for grants if they have a budget of a certain size, and how are they supposed to get to a budget of that certain size if they can't get the funding, right? So some of what we've seen, I think, and are seeing in Arts Capital is that there really is, again, power in numbers, the solidarity of having a bunch of organizations with a bunch of different backgrounds, different sizes, different issue areas, all band together and show, this isn't an individual organization thing, this is systemic. It's affecting all of our organizations from, our $35,000 budgets all the way up to the Atlanta Ballet. And so, no, it's not just that we don't know how to run an organization, it's just that there are bigger things at play. So I think kind of banding together, forming community, and then being willing to have those really thoughtful conversations and trust that the folks on the other side of it are also wanting, the best things, that you all have the best thing at heart. You want the organization to survive, you want to thrive, you want to see the arts in Atlanta be great. And so sometimes it just takes a little hand-holding to get there, but working together is what makes that possible, I think. Other question? Yes.
Along the lines of working together, as far as like individual artists having ideas and bringing people together, I'd love to hear a few things that you think work and don't work about maybe approaching larger individual organizations, not just for funding, but just really organizing. For instance, I'm working on creating an art tour on the south side of town, and I've approached a lot of people, but then I'm like, oh my God, I'm leaving this person out, and oh, we need to bring this person in, and so I think inside of it, like my question really is like, what are some things that you think like work and don't work about individual artists, like having an idea and like bringing people together and starting something and having it like continue or thrive?
So I'll speak to maybe the second part of your question, which is really the part, after you've gotten the group together and you're approaching folks for either funding or support or what have you. I would highly recommend that artists take a thorough and honest survey of the cultural landscape in general. One thing that we do get a lot every year at Idea Capital in the applications is people who are claiming that they're doing something for the first time, and they are absolutely not doing this for the first time, or there have been other organizations out there doing this sort of thing or that sort of thing, where there are other, maybe, whatever it might be that has preceded that organization. And so I would say, as part of whatever argument you build or whatever pitch you build, make sure that you've really done some sort of assessment of, okay, there is this organization doing this kind of thing, but here's how we're different. Here's how we're not just repeating what they're doing. That is something that I find is quite common in the applications that we receive.
Yeah, which we're participating in the South Arts thing. But for us, it's similar. We like when an idea comes to us and it's a little bit more baked. We don't like to be approached when something's very preliminary and they want us to be like a part of the, ideation of it. We're sort of at a level now where we need to be brought in when it's like more cooked, more baked. So, but I think, to your point, everybody should start stuff if you feel like it. I've done it many, many times and found success in it. So,
I would say, we're fine with stuff that's unbaked. That's, that's kind of our, that's kind of our place. But our thing is more, if you are saying that I am the first person in Atlanta who has ever done this, and you know for a fact this has been done 6 times before, that just is telling us that you haven't done your homework. So that's, that's really what I'm trying to say there.
I would say be aware of your capacity. So if you can have 30 organizations on this tour, and you find 6 more you need to add, decide what 6 you have to get rid of. Don't decide you can now do 40. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Good. Other questions? Good. All right. Thank you all for being here. I'll welcome Sarah back up. But yeah, and remember, join a grant review panel if you can. Tina in this beautiful dress with her hand up will help you do that.
Closing notes. Thank you so much for being here, y'all. I'm looking out and seeing people that have been here all day since this morning and have been in and asking questions, especially you. And I want to say just that it means so much to us that y'all were willing to come and kind of like take this nerdy ride with us today. And I hope that you'll come back and get back on the nerdy ride tomorrow. And so there's a couple of things I want to say about the rest of today, which is, Jessica, I want to ask you to okay. Sorry, I'm a little tired. So Jessica Helfrecht and Echo Contemporary have very generously offered to open up their opening reception for the 3 shows that they're opening this evening a little early to create a space for all of us to kind of have like a place to hang out and get together and talk and debrief and compare notes from today's talks. So at 6,
I can be ready at 5.
we don't speed, but yeah, at 5. So in about an hour, you can show up at Echo Contemporary and be there early, and it'll be just us, and we'll have an exclusive preview of the exhibitions. Jessica, will you tell folks just a little bit about what those exhibitions are?
We've got 3 exhibitions opening. Chase Gardner, it's her very first show, so an emerging artist, did some ceramic work. Charity Hamadullah has mixed media work, some paintings and some sculptures. And Trey Dowell has some mixed media work too. So 3 great artists, and then come and have a drink, some beer, wine, cheese.
Cheese. And so thank you, Jessica, so much. And then it'll roll into the public opening, so other folks will be arriving. And so it can just organically flow into an evening of whatever you decide to get into. But don't get into too much, because tomorrow we're reconvening for day 2 of Atlanta Art Ecosystems, and we have 3 really fantastic events. First, we have a panel on thinking about publicness, thinking about art in public, thinking about public art initiatives that maybe confound or work against just being kind of in lockstep with development and gentrification specifically. And that conversation is going to be moderated by Roshni, who was just, that's Miranda, sorry. Miranda Kyle, who's not here right now. And then we have a panel on cross-sector collaboration that Roshni is going to moderate. That's going to be about seeking sustainability and funding and new audiences through working across sectors outside of the arts. And then we have an invited house guest, because we really wanted to embrace the idea that we kind of have all the ideas and all of the answers and everything that we need to be whole and to be more and to be ambitious we have. But we're Southern, we want to have a house guest. So we invited Fawz Kabra and Itzhak Burbich from Brief Histories in New York. They've just arrived off of their plane. They're back there in the back. And they're going to talk about creating a kind of a Kunsthalle model of exhibition space and a small artist project press, kind of out of thin air, and tell us their story. And so I invite all of y'all to come back and be a part of that tomorrow. Or or pat yourselves on the back for making it through a whole day of discursive programming today. And thanks again to Atlanta Contemporary. Floyd just passed by. Thanks to Floyd and the team at Atlanta Contemporary for hosting us. And yeah, have a great evening, y'all.